I really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
asking there, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
But no, thank you. Um, anyway, so I had the pleasure of sort of walking through some of this earlier with another small group, and I said I was going to turn it into a discussion, and I didn't. I just thought, oh, I've got to get through this. I got to get through that. So hopefully I'll do better this time around. Let's see. Please play. No, animation pane, not what I want. Okay, there we go. Theoretically, you are seeing my PowerPoint. And what I'll do is walk through this, and I'm going to go through a number of things. And as I do, Crystal and Sue, you know, I know both of you, and really don't hesitate for a second. Say, hey, elaborate on that, or hey, you know, can you please move on? Okay, I want you guys both to just feel this is a little bit more informal than I'm capable of doing. So let's see. Let me pull this down a smidge. And with Collaborate, as I'm sure you know, just the general stuff I always say is, of course, if you've used it much, you know that if you go to the lower corner where you see my little face, it will pop up and take the screen, and then it will also swap back to what I'm sharing. And right now I'm just sharing a PowerPoint that is on one of the three screens that I have here. So that's sort of kind of how I'm going to do it. Anyways, but let me muscle right into this. But first I'm going to ask you, when it comes to sort of the LMS and some of the affordances, and the ones that we're going to be talking about are things like how to initially set it up, how to import and that kind of stuff. Not at length, but we're going to sort of talk about the logic behind how you do that, how to clean it up for any course that's maybe been around for a few semesters and is starting to have all kinds of stuff in its like question banks. There's that. And then I'm going to also touch on H5P and some of the third-party tools. And I'm going to walk through a lot of that stuff because I know you're familiar with it at some level. If you're not a problem. You can just ask me to go on a little further. Sue, on terms of your comfort and what you tend to do with the LMS, would you mind sharing with us?
Sure. So I'm starting teaching my third semester here using my courses. And what I did in the first one was more just had the import in of the advanced data structures class and added some things to it. Kind of bumbled my way through it. For the last two classes I had, one was teaching the Carnegie Mellon Python class. And so that one, there wasn't an integration with LMS until the class had already started, and it was already challenging enough for the students. And so we sort of kept this two classes as being, they did most everything on Sail platform, and I tried to import the grades. The other class, the beginning Java, there was a Cengage part of it, but not all the students had Cengage or wanted to buy it. So I tried to follow the instructions that Tanya had done, which is where she kept an assignment thing that she would bring the grades over, and it was a total cluster because I had no idea when they were submitting anything or when things were done. It was very much of a challenge. So this coming semester, I took a look at the content for the Advanced Java and for the C# class, both of which I thought were needed a lot more material. And so I took the theory of what they had before, and for the C# class, I've made it so Cengage is required because that's going to be I'm going to be learning some along with the students. So I didn't want to have too much of a hurdle. So for that, I talked with the Cengage person, Liz, I think it is. And we walked through the class that I had and made sure things were set up properly so that I won't have to.
How'd that go?
It went well.
How'd that go? Okay, because she's really nice.
Yeah. So I just said, I want to make sure that I've got this thing linked up correctly. I'm not sure if things changed with LMS and Cengage because 2 days ago or so, I was taking a look at the class trying to make a link to the assignments, and it was saying something like the content was no longer available or something weird. Wasn't entirely sure about that. So I was going to look at that again today. So the Cengage one is going to be a required component of the C# class. Hopefully it just brings the grades in and I don't have to manage things. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
The Advanced Java class, I'm going to be teaching them a lot of stuff that's not in our books, but more things that they need to know in Java. So I'm going to say they could use the Cengage to do reading. They have already used the previous version of the book in the previous class. We're just going to go into a few more details. And then most of it, I'm providing PDFs of documents of, here's the notes that you need to have, and then assignments that we'll be old school where they submit the Java code to me and I do the grading myself.
How large
So for that
is that
one,
group?
we won't have question banks for that one.
Okay. How large is that group?
So the C# one is 12 people. The advanced Java right now is 6.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Which is
I
much
just,
better than my 50 kids in my last class.
yeah, yeah, that's what I was looking for because, dang, on those classes where I see folks who, like, if Cengage didn't work and they're having to, jump back and forth and all with a lot of students, golly, that is so hard to sustain.
Yeah, I had 50 classes in the beginning Java one, which I had to manage all of that, and then 50 kids in the Python one where I had to manually bring the grades across, and I turned grayer by the end of the season. That's why I
I
said
hear
for
you.
the C# one, it's Cengage. If you don't have Cengage, talk to the people at Blue Ridge and figure it out.
Good. Good. Yeah, and there again, always, please just hop in if you're having difficulty, reach out, and especially beginning of semester, it's just crucial that you don't get left in the wind, because you're remote and we're not paying attention. Sarah, did you have something?
I'm putting it in the chat for Sue. I just want to make sure I get the course numbers for that because this is an issue Leah's been working on with some other faculty today. So Sue, I'm sending you a chat.
Sure, absolutely.
Yay! I love it when Sarah's here. Anyway, Crystal, as one of our long-running adjuncts who are remarkable and experienced, how are you? What's your comfort zone with sort of the high-end stuff on this? Because you've used it so much, I assume that you're pretty familiar with all of it.
Pretty percent. I want to come help Sue. That's what I want to do. Because that sounds horrible. Oh my gosh. And I don't even know what language she's speaking, but I want to come help her.
It was a challenge.
Oh man.
I was like, seriously?
I'm just
man.
trying to
Crystal?
streamline things more, Kevin. Like, so for all of my discussions, they now have rubrics. And like almost all of I'm trying to work on making sure all the assignments also have rubrics because it's much faster to grade that way. And so that's really kind of what I'm trying to do. I'm not sure I'm doing exactly the greatest job, but I think I am. I don't know.
Right. No, that's great. But the other with the rubrics and stuff, that then part of the stuff we're going to kicking over today is just how great it is because if you put the work in up front, it really does. Especially the larger your class is, the more it helps in the long run. And I know you know that. But we're going to kick over some stuff now. So I've got this designed for distance ed and face to face and hybrid. Sue and Crystal, do you guys teach any? Clearly not here. Crystal's in Arizona. Do you guys teach any face-to-face still in right now off and on?
No, I'm up in Asheville, so it's a challenge for me to if
Sure.
I was to come down.
Yeah. Well, no, I know some people teach in multiple places. That's why I was inquiring, just to find out if there's any application for some of these other use cases. And Crystal, do you ever teach anything out there? Are you teaching anything face-to-face?
I'm teaching at U of A face-to-face, but they use D2L.
Okay.
And so that's a different.
Well, it's philosophical stuff. So, but that's very helpful. Thank you very much. Anyway, if you guys don't mind, I'll start in, and then, like I said, I want you to go immediately to your use case as I sort of wander through some of this, because you develop the outline for the larger group, and then we sort of see. I really like it when it's fairly small, so we can just have that turn into a discussion. So I'm going to go back to sharing my little PowerPoint screen. And I'll share audio with it because who knows. Okay. So what I've got here is when we were talking about this, I just was going over in my head, where I am right now with, having spent the past, 20 years of my life basically focusing on this kind of junk. And I was just sort of looking at rethinking as we all, begin to recognize this tool is going to be part of what we have on our toolkit moving forward, regardless. Now, what I'm trying to also be sensitive about, and I know you guys know the drill, that, if I'm teaching welding, then, my grades are going to be in this and, maybe some resources, who knows? And, they're going to look at their syllabus in here. So that may be it. So there's this sliding scale, and it's really important, I think, when we go through this, not to, assume that everyone has similar situations, because as you both know, teaching just is so different. from item to item. So I wanted to start off with this as my primary metaphor. A high striker, turns out, is the tool that you can see you'll see at a glance, with the icon what it is. It is a strength tester that was, at carnivals for years and years, and we've all seen them. And theoretically, if they're not rigged, they're pretty good at sort of measuring one's affinity for a given skill set. Now, I sort of think a lot of times LMSs sort of lean towards being high strikers. But let's just humor me, and I'll went on about my metaphor again. And tell me if you've got other ones, because I've got like 6 layers here of high striker. The first and perhaps the toughest one is unwilling learner. And I want you to know that if you're in class, I've got a little bell that rings every time this shows up. So it made me happy. Okay, go please. There we go. So the first one is unwilling learner, and we've had those, and that even, here I am teaching college, and it's like I'm teaching, junior high again, where I have students come in like, I don't want to be here. And the fact is they're 22, and the only way their mom's going to let them stay at the house is if they show up to class. In terms of percentages for you guys, Crystal and Sue, what's the percentage? Do you get much of this? I know they generally tend to drop after a week or two. What's your unwilling learner situation?
I had several in this last class. I had some who I think I would have benefited from being in the office where I could walk them through and say,
right,
no, please do this, because it seems as though when trying to do it remote, they weren't. I said, okay, go to this section and click on that, and then they were just lost.
right.
Most of those ended up dropping. I had a couple others who were very persistent, which I was loving, where I did a gazillion Zoom sessions with them specifically. I remember
Excellent.
my phrase was, "Stop guessing. What is it I'm asking?" And they
Yeah,
tried. They
good.
tried really hard, and they ended up passing, which was wonderful. But
yeah,
there were some that were just struggling with concepts. That it's really hard to get a concept across when they've not spent the time or don't have the linkage in their brain to say, oh, you're going
right.
from point A to point B.
Right. Yeah. And that, there's not the acuity, and I've played with these 6 levels here, but for the unwilling, the I don't want to be here people. Do you have many of those that end up in your classes, Crystal?
I don't really have a lot of those because, my class is one they're just going to choose to take. But
right.
It's not, usually required or anything like that for a major. But I get some that are like, it's more than they thought it was going to be because, PE is always just an easy A. And when they find out, no, you really have to do some things, then I have those people. So I don't know what where in your categories that is, but
Okay. Well, yeah, let me march through them, and then we'll come back at the end. And I would love to get your feedback on this. I think this is time well spent, though. Just for the record, I've just been trying to figure out, how can we serve these different communities? And this one is the toughest for me. I had a person who just gotten out of high school whose mother was dropping him off every day for my ACA class. And after, towards the end of the semester, he was, I said, you're not showing up, and I was going to drop him. And his mother said, no, I drop him off every morning at 9 o'clock. How could that be? Ooh, hate that. Anyway, so the second student level I have for my high striker is the unable learner, or the superior mindset. And I don't know about you, but an unable learner is somebody who's got 5 kids perhaps and no help. And this person really thinks, I've got to turn a corner. I really want this. I'm going to make college work for me. But they've chosen a time in their life when it's really just, it may just be a bad fit. And that's the kind of thing that, our persistence meter on this side says, oh, we need to keep every student here. But, there's sometimes that you're unable to learn for, reasonable reasons, and it isn't lack of trying. A superior mindset I put in there, not as a diss at all. I've got a daughter who can't deal with college because she always disagrees with how it's being presented. And then she disagrees with, the content. And And she's never going to be able to sort of say, hey, for to succeed here, I've got to sort of get over being bothered and see my vertical importance versus horizontal importance. And it's a whole lecture there. Anyways, but these sort of struck me as the same kind, that they're probably not going to succeed, but there's not a lot we can do. That brings us, of course, to the novice learner. And the novice learner, a lot of people think, well, that's the low end, but we know it's not. The novice learner is somebody who just needs some hand holding. Maybe they're real freshmen who just weren't very academic at the time, or maybe they just haven't figured out the whole college thing. And the ACA class hopefully will help with that. But we know what the novice learner is, but the novice learner isn't the hardest challenge, obviously. And then an isolated learner, I have that as someone who really doesn't have a support group, doesn't have a cohort. And the studies that came out of Harvard some years ago showed the people who did best in face-to-face environments were people who were in study groups, because they created this support group. And if you're by yourself and you're really trying to get it, that is just tough. It's tough sledding. And then I'll ask you all to comment on these just in terms of what your experience has been real fast. Now, sort of not the really terrific student to have is somebody who's invested in being here, but they don't have a lot of the academic skills, or they don't have a lot of the the kind of skills that help you win in college, but they maybe are good at other things. And trying to help that person turn the corner is a fun task if you can help them with it. And then, of course, lastly, we have the self-motivated problem solver, the problem who, if you say, hey, sign up for Cengage, they just do, because they know how to solve those kind of problems. And that isn't ancillary to college now, as you guys know. If a student can't hop through the series of hoops of Cengage, Proctor Track, Labster, name it, they can't succeed. If they can't get to school, which is school there, they can't succeed. And that's the tough stuff here. And I know that that's what you were describing, Sue. We're trying to help a lot of these students, who just can't sort of get it on their own. And that whole thing, though, is we have somebody who's self-motivated and problem solver. In your estimation, ladies, what's sort of the norm, or is this a pretty even distribution?
I would say I have a lot of self-motivated, even some invested. And then you just have some, especially since pandemic, just unable.
Right.
That has risen so much in the kids that I've come across.
Thank you.
In this last semester, so I had some of each of these. The ones that were a joy to me were the self-motivated problem solvers, because I could just get them started down a path and they could take care of it. I had a lot of the novice, isolated, and invested but non-academic. The thing that really helped them was, since it was remote and I do show them a lot of technical things, I show them a lot on my computer screen, like, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm actually showing you that I'm doing this, and everything was recorded, and it had transcripts as well. And they got a link to the recorded thing usually that same evening. And many of them said they went back through and rewatched some parts that they couldn't get the first couple times, and they could rewatch it a couple times, which they would not have gotten, and they would have struggled if that was a live class, because then you can't watch somebody do it over again. I had a lot of novice learners because they were both intro classes, but I can tell you that Python class was like drinking from a fire hose, and I lost a lot of people in the first 3 weeks who thought, I'm not really getting it, I'm going to give it another week and then I'll really dig in, and then they were behind from the 8 ball.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Anyways, thanks for sharing that. And I'm going to skip through some of these slides and get to the actual technique part of it. But just what happens real often in these conversations, I find that, we tend to sort of put them all in the same, here's what you need, but they vary so radically by student, radically by class, radically by field, and so on, that really just sort of trying to meet you guys, where you are. And you can glance at this. I'm not going to go into it, but just how our students actually connect with the LMS, and that ultimately whatever use case you have, and for you guys, they're doing it all pretty much on there, so I won't pursue it. But it's sort of up to us to make sure that we are and I'm just going to click through this as well, that we are basically advertising, here's what's expected of you. So no one's surprised. But this whole situation here, where if what a student, what rather a faculty member is having them do with the LMS differs wildly. But like I said, since we're in a very specific group, I'll just click through that. And but it is really everything from, nominal for us. The minimum is syllabus and gradebook, and then really I'm trying to get people in face-to-face to really sort of buy into some of the other values and efficiencies that come there, and that efficiency's got to a lot of the auto grading part. And then of course we have this set of concerns here, where we have LTI, which of course we use it a lot, but it means learning technology integration. 20 years ago, Blackboard and a couple of these other companies tried to come up with what are DIN standards. DIN standards means that all the parts of all the tools fit each other. That's Deutsche Industrial Number. And that's something they came up with a long time ago. And I don't know if you know this, but initially, and I'll make it quick, initially, the train tracks around our country were different sizes. So trains would have to basically come off, put on a different width of wheels before they could continue, before they even had standardized that. And I'm looking forward to the day that the LTI, the learning technology integration, gets one step closer. But it's sort of like Apple computers. If your LMS isn't a little different and it's totally, the same as the others, well then, you no longer have a product. So they do have some motive to make it not work. And we'll be touching base a little bit on the difference between assessment for verification or mastery, or formative assessment versus summative assessment. I know you two as skilled instructors have this, but it's just, I'm trying to really preach to folks that formative assessment is really, really important. And some of the tools we'll be looking at or talking about with WooClap and H5P, for instance, allow you to have multiple tries at tasks until you can sort of show that you're getting it. And then you as the instructor, who maybe aren't spending a lot of face-to-face with students, can sort of keep up with that. And the kind of stuff you're doing, Sue, where you're creating these videos and reaching out, clearly you're doing a lot of formative assessment. And then, well, I'll just, like I said, I'll cruise through this real fast then. And little discussion though on LMS and agency. Another thing is that what I'm trying to do is encourage faculty to have students turning stuff in or interacting all the time. So if the student's falling behind from non-participation, we're catching that real early on, and that is the agency thing. And one of the things I'll do with my my ACA class, let me see if I can pull up the right one and show you what I mean here. This is something I do now in a LMS, in a live class that I'm doing, for instance. When I have Collaborate up, I'll always have them use the smile or the sad face at intervals. I'll say who's following, who's not, and then if someone doesn't put up a smiley face or a frowny face, I'll go ahead and bump them from the class. But I'll tell them up front that's what's going to happen. With that said, Sue and Crystal, what do you do to let me ask this: how many synchronous events do you generally have, or do you?
So for mine, I don't assume that they're going to be there when I give the lecture.
Okay.
Because with what I've seen over the last 2 semesters, I have a wide range of people who are programming, some who have day jobs and they're not available till 10 p.m. Another ones who work an evening shift at the grocery store, and so they're available until 2 p.m. So there's a whole lot of non-overlap. So I try to keep track of who attended and watched the lecture by having an attendance thing, but there's some people who I kind of got lost in the whole mix because if they say they watched the lecture but they don't seem to do the assignments, how do I interact with them? I struggled with that.
Right. Yeah, that's good. What about you, Crystal?
I only do like 2 live classes, and I usually have a third of the class that shows up, a third to half.
Right. Now you still are happy by and large with the amount of participation you're getting. is it just the nature of the class, or are you putting in some incentives to make sure that people are, keeping up on a week-to-week basis?
I'm very dogmatic about sending out emails. Like if they haven't showed up for a week or two, I'm sending them something,
Right.
just trying to keep up with it that way. But it's kind of laborious, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
make
right.
the
Well,
attendance be something that's graded. They get 10% of their grade if they just say that they've showed up to each of the ones. So, and after like 2 weeks, I set it to 0, and they get a notification their grade dropped to 0 in that. And that tends
yeah.
to incentivize some.
Yeah. And with that, there's also especially for the stuff, what we can put out as rich media for the LMS, with LMS, where you're putting out videos. Do either of you, because I know, Sue, you do a lot of that, do you have any fashion for like using, for instance, H5P, you can put like a question at the middle and the end just to sort of get some kind of sense that they're opening the book?
I've not
Do you
done
know what
that.
I'm
In
talking
fact,
about?
I'm not even sure what H5P is. So,
Okay,
I've never
great.
done
Good.
anything with that either. So
Okay. Well, I'll show you some of that. Tell you what I'll do. A lot of these slides I have, this is we're talking about how your course is going to be set up depending on how it's made, whether it's made by your department, whether you're instructing yourself. And I know with both of you, you're doing a lot of your own building, and we're going to walk through that. But I'm just going to go ahead and skip right ahead through this to a couple of things. The first one, and I'll stop sharing. Well, the first one I'm going to show is basically, let me get out of quick there, PowerPoint. Well, let me show you a couple of things on this Bio 168 I made, which is basically anatomy and physics. And that'll show you also a sense of what H5P is. Then I'll show you the idea behind it. Let's see. And let me pull this up too. I'm sorry. I've got a topics point that I was getting to here. I apologize for the delay. Here we go. All right, I'll go back to sharing. Okay. First of all, this is the course that I was talking about, and what I've done here, I'm gonna get to H5P in just a moment, but let me start with just an overall the way this is sort of composed and drawn out here. Generally speaking, all of these classes start with this introduction and the getting started, which you both know, and how that works. And really, if you're going to use any kind of proctoring software, making sure that people are doing that right out of the gate. But also, as you know, if they're going to use Cengage or one of these other platforms that we're trying to get them to get in and succeed getting in that in the first 2 or 3 days, or understanding that if that's not a problem they can solve, then there's no chance they'll succeed in the class. So having that sort of front loaded. The other thing I'll point out in this class is I can tell how big the footprint is on this. This is an advanced tip. I can tell how big the footprint on this is if someone's using a tablet by just sliding this in. Now this is how it would look on a tablet. This is how it would look if I got it all the way down to a phone size. And just so you know, as you're designing classes, if you're curious, I'm not saying that we should encourage students to try to work on a phone, quite the contrary, but some do. And they certainly shouldn't test on it, because if the phone crashes, and there's a single take, they're hurting. But if you get this shoved in this far, I don't know if you've done it or not, this is what a phone will do. And the application itself that they can download has a very similar behavior. If I click this, it'll open up my index to all of these chapters. And then I can click back into them and migrate around. But that's just a little tip right out of the gate. If you're curious to know how your LMS is going to look on a tablet or smaller handheld devices, there you go. And I know the kind of stuff that you teach, Sue, is so web specific and so interface driven that you probably have this stuff cold. Another thing I'll show out that I did with this is this instructor, course developer, the unit thing is a big deal to how class is constructed, because in every unit A, chapter 1 and chapter 2, She has certain assignments in chapter 1 and certain assignments in chapter 2, but it bothered me that there's no way to break up the index. So you have 2 pieces, 2 pieces, break, 2 pieces, break. So that separator there, have you ever seen that separator before, he asks. I'm taking that as a no.
I haven't, but I think it looks really cool. But I was kind of wondering how you did that.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? So it was just bugging me. So this is a complicated thing I did. Here's the topic. I put this topic in with the last group. What I do with the topic at the top, I'm going to go to edit. I just basically put in a topic and make the topic name this long line. So I do that, and that's all I do for that entire chapter. That chapter has a section name of a line. I hit save changes, and then what I get is if you have a reason where you want to visually break that up. Now, every time a student clicks on one of these lines, they can open a non-existing chapter, but clearly they'll know how to get back out of it. But all these are these little separators I put in there is for that purpose. And so the next thing when it comes to separation, banners that I have here, this art that they have in this book isn't terrific. However, the students are using this text. So what I'm doing is I'm always snagging and I can legally because we buy rights to this book for as long as we are having students use it. I'm snagging all of these banners basically and making them from the stuff in this McGraw textbook. So it comes out looking pretty nice. It's not that I'm a great artist, but I have Unit A. This is just chapter 2, then chapter 3. And so having these banners that really complement the textbook rather than just stuff that is snagged off the internet. Now, not you guys because you're high end, but a lot of folks will come in who teach quite a few classes, adjuncts who teach, number of schools. They will have just done their best to collect their materials for chemistry 3 or whatever they're teaching along the way. And then they'll try to use those in every class they populate. And, as best we can for all of this kind of stuff, we want to try to work from the graphics that are supplied. Now, this anatomy book has tons and tons of great graphics. So I could use those in helping build some H5P interactives. Now,
so
I'm
did
going
you
to show
grab
you
that by taking a look at the textbook and just grabbing it as a screenshot and then putting it in here as a graphic? How did you?
Great question. Great question. That's what I'll do consistently. I'm going to use the technologist. Snagit is this terrific, inexpensive tool for that. And then like this bordered font is easy to create. This is easy to create. And then all of these have 2 levels because there's, a chapter 3 and a chapter 4. And this is just chapter 4. So all I've done is just snag this, but I go to their site and very often they'll have, like in this one, they have all this background art. They have background art and labeled background art. So it's just terrific for the kind of stuff that, I'm making in that. And then these are the H5P LMS. Before I do that though, let me talk about labels. Now the labels that we've got here, you've seen them, we all use them, they're crucial, but it's also, it's important if you're using this not to think that a label is designed just strictly as a separator. Instead, labels have a purpose for anything outward facing. So if you want to have a video outward facing as I get here, and very often that's not very clean, so I encourage people to put it in a drop down, but try to never use an outside link because YouTube has an algorithm for knowing what they're interested in. That algorithm is being used to distract them away from anything they go to on YouTube on their side. So always try to embed. And if you have questions about embedding, I can show that, in instant right now, just with us. But instead, I'm going to just show simple label creation is if I come down here and I'm going to use a label. And by the way, you'll see that all this iconography has changed slightly with this version that just came out over Christmas. I've gone through and I've tested everything, and it almost, except for open forms are going away, pretty much everything else still behaves the same, except for like folders, which I'll get to. But if I come down here and I say I want to add a label, what's sort of cool about this is I can put anything in here. I can put in, any font I want, and it'll just be font on the screen. Now, there are times where that's appropriate, where you want the students to see that, and then taking the time to go through and putting in, the boldface and this and that. So if this all I want is text on the screen, of course, I will just type in there, and if I do nothing, it'll show up just like that at the very bottom, obviously. However, oh, I thought it would. Oh, I went back to the, oh, no, I didn't. It's catching up with me. So anytime I want to, I can put that in, but I would always dress it up a little, and I would put in, then instead on the label only, they have this really weird little non-intuitive tool that if I select this and I come up here, then it will pull this and they'll put the little blue screen around it and so on. However, if I go down a line, it's just text again. And then of course I can put in any image I want and any video that I want. So say I wanted, and I'm just going to show you this real fast. I'm showing this just to say if it interests you, we can work on it one-on-one, because this isn't, this is just a demo. This isn't a lesson. But if I go to this individual, I want this as the video in there because I'm crazy about classical piano. I copy that. I come here. Now, if I go back to my label, wherever that's open, great. And I put that underneath this part, then it'll look nice. And I can just say, I want to insert a video. I want to insert a video. Now, this tool exists all over in these different interfaces, but if you use label, it's outward facing. So maybe there's something that it's you talking at the beginning, say, hey, the most important thing, you have that. So you can sort of command their attention by putting this in a label instead of using it, using labels just as, those little separators. So if I hit save and return to course, I will have this pianist on the front of chapter 4. I'm going to make chapter 4 where I stay for a minute here. Then there it is. And so I'm just saying for labels, you can use them as separators, but also think about anything that you want to have outward facing. You could pop that in there, including H5P. So let me go ahead and delete that because I'm doing this in the wrong course. Delete that, Kevin. Okay. Okay. So the next thing I want to show in this though is so we have the banners, we have the labels, and we have the separators on the side. The other thing I want to show you right now is the way folders work now. This is a little different. You can see it has a little drop down chevron on this side. So I can hide this so only I can see it, obviously. I can allow the students to see this. So say, Sue, if you have like on this one area, you've created 4 videos for people who need some remediation. You don't want them cluttering the screen, but you can just put the folder at the bottom here as your remediation folder. And what will happen when they use that chevron, the students will be able to see that they can hit any one of those videos. And then you can also put your PDFs in here and stuff. The other thing that's cool about this, if you're working with someone else especially, is if I go to this and I want to edit it, and I can download the whole thing, by the way, which is a win if that's what I want. The other thing, though, is if I'm in the edit mode with how folders work now, what you'll see is they populate right here in this little box, and I can just drag other folders right into there. Drag any file or anything I want into there. Now for videos and rich media, generally we're using links, so it may not be ideal for that now that I think about it. But still, this is a really nice feature that you can have them download it all at once if you'd like. Another thing that I'm doing, because I'm creating these for other faculty, is what I'm doing is I'm taking every single media item in this chapter and I'm loading it into a folder at the bottom first. And I'm about to show you something. And if you're not following me, tell me. For instance, this banner, I wanted it here, but I wanted the faculty member to know where it is. And the fact is, when we go into editing one of these things, what you'll see is, and you probably bumped into this a lot, both of you. If I want to get a different folder, I mean a different banner there, and so it says, where do you want to get it? So I'm going to have browse repositories. Well, then I hit server files. Well, now I've got all kinds of server files. However, what it will show me here is it'll show me the folders at the bottom of each. So what I can do for this chapter is I'll see the chapter there. I'll be able to click into it, and then anything I've uploaded, I can use that. That's where I get the files that I'm using. I'm not just uploading them randomly to the top level of the server, because basically the full folder structure that the LMS gives you naturally is really not very hot, and really it's hard to find stuff later. So what I'm trying to do now is encourage people for their own like internal repository is to use the folder at the bottom of that. And then when you go searching for stuff in the resources, you'll see your folder structure there and you'll see what you put there. Does that make sense?
I believe so. Everything that you put in the server repository are the only things that you've added as folders into here?
Yeah, what happens is every time you upload an image to the LMS, it just sort of dumps it into the server, and then you have to hunt for it later. However, if you have a folder that you put in at the chapter level and you move stuff into that folder, then when you go to hunt through the server, you'll see that folder exists, and that's where you'll know it is. So all the stuff that's in chapter 4 is there. And this seems to be freaking out a little bit on me. Let me see what's going on. Okay. So I'm just throwing out folders as this is just the organizing principles, but now I've sort of been wandering far afield. I'm going to touch on H5P, and then we're going to sort of go to sort of general topics and see what might be of interest to you. And what I can do is demo now, and then anything you want to sit down with for half an hour and walk through, we can do that as well. Let me show you what H5P is. Now, H5P are these little HTML units that can be saved on your computer, that can be uploaded into this. And when you have one of these guys, I made one here. This is a, let me find a drop and drag for a visual. Now this is, for anatomy, there's a whole lot of intellectual capital, memorization that we want them to do. So what I'm going to show you right now is, I didn't want them just to have to go through Word documents and fill all this out. What I did was I created lots and lots of these drag and drops, where I'll show you a really simple one first. And because it's H5P, it automatically informs the gradebook. I have to set it up a certain way, but it'll automatically inform the gradebook. Now here, I want to know which is the formal, which is the sagittal, and which is the transverse, and then I can check it. Oh, look at that, I got 3 out of 3. It tells me that I got an A. Now I can redo this if I choose to, or I can make so students can redo it. And then what will happen, and this is great for what you see here, is simple categorization. This informs the gradebook, but I can make it so the first attempt gets a score, and later attempts just allow them to find the correct answers. Otherwise, you just have them, muscling through and doing it every way they can. Here's a more complicated version of the same kind of a drag and drop. Now, for you guys, drag and drop may not be a great fit. I don't know. But if it is, I'd be glad to show you how to do these, because while they're a little time consuming the first few times you do them, they actually are terrific, and they are auto grading. So if I go to, I'm in chapter 1, body orientation, directionality. Let's see. I'm looking for my. Oh, that's right. This isn't the first one, but still, you can. I'll show you. I've got a bunch of these that are drag and drop in every one of these chapters. So I've created these as little HTML packets, and you can download an application called Lumi that allows you to do that. But for this one, for instance, I didn't want to have students fill in the blank, because they can screw that up so easy and miss the correct answer just because of a typo or a homonym. So instead, I've done this, because this is all auto grading. These classes are large, so the students get to go. They get to check it. Oh, they got 0. I can retry this, but they got the first score. And now, lastly, for H5P, what you can do is you can also do basically a video in that, where what you'll do is you can put a video in and then put in questions at different intervals within that video. Let me see. I've got one of those in my bio courses. Okay, let me pop into one of those. But with that, what you can do. Oops, sorry. Okay. So within this, what I have H5P that have videos in them as well. And what I can do, let me see if I can find one real fast. Okay, this H5P is all I had to do was basically grab a video that I've already made, and then I'll put it in there, and then it will allow me to put in questions at intervals anywhere I'd like, and it'll do another few things. Now I hope I have turned the audio to share the audio on. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it. I'll maximize this. And I'll stop that there. But I've got a bunch of these to show, but that shows a number of the little things that it will do, and you can have documents attached to it and so on, like you're seeing there. But at the end of the day, what I wanted to show you there, Sue, is that you can put in like just a simple question at the end of each one, and then you can go through and duplicate that so that you basically can put in a different video and then move your question around. It's not terribly time consuming to do if you see that as a possibility. And then the other thing I'll show you is this is where the H5P are kept in a content bank. This is new with this last year for H5P, but the content bank is where I now store all of these little HTML bobs that can be put in there. So each one of these is a different kind of gadget. Now, within the content bank where this is shown, same as the question bank for a quiz, I can just click this and take a look and see what it is. And then I can edit it in this content bank, and it will edit it in the course itself, because it's drawing these from that content bank. So that's just real fast. This is just a little quiz that I created, and it's drag and drop, but it's also made with H5P, and this is existing in the content bank. So that's something new in the course itself. Let me just pull up this one more time here and see. We've talked about the layout and the footprint a little bit. We talked on banners and separators. We talked about labels are a little different. We talked about folder use. I just barely brushed the topic of H5P. Now, I'm not right now, but is there anything that you see here or that you have that we touched on that you're individually curious about that I can touch on a little bit, and then we can set up individual meetings later?
Personally, I'd love to know more about the content and question banks. One of the Java classes I taught, the Intro to Java one, already had a bunch of content as far as for questions in there. And I tried to edit some of them, and I got hopelessly lost and ended up just using what they had, which weren't necessarily the best questions, but I couldn't figure out how to get it resolved.
Right.
And that
And
says
that's
something
not
that's
you.
important in the field.
Yeah, that's sorry for interrupting. That's not you. That really. What I did with the class you'll see here. I went through and I had an empty shell and I made sure nothing was in it. When I import it, I don't have to import any question banks at all, which means I'm telling myself I'm going to upload question bank. So what I did, this is my content bank, my question bank, and we won't cover it right now, obviously, but if I go to categories, by the way, are titles of groups of questions or just titles. It makes no sense how they do that. But see what I've done is I put all these chapter tests. This is all of the questions. These are all the questions. You can use as much of those as you want, but I've organized them in a given category. And then I put other category, the category down here, I can't get rid of. These are in the system. I don't know why, but they can't delete them from the core. But so what I did here was I just deleted everything except what I wanted. And then I organize them and label them. We can talk about that, but yeah, we can definitely do that. Anything else, Sue or Crystal, that we haven't touched on, but you might be interested in finding out more about? And like I said, on the H5P, and that is also half hour long sessions till you sort of get your feet wet with that. Crystal?
Yeah, I'd be interested in the H5P or HP5, whatever you call it.
Yeah,
and how to do that, because I put videos up there. I make videos all the time for the students,
right.
and like nobody watches them.
Right, and that's what happened. Ben Kish had done. Oh, he's done 165 different videos with local professionals for his leadership class, and they're just great. And then we're looking at the analytics, and the students liked the idea of them, but they weren't actually watching them. So we went back through, and Ben started putting them as, and H5P is HTML5 package, just for whatever that's worth. Anyway, so yeah, we can definitely do that. And once you get sort of a groove and you sort of have one or two of these templates you can use, as I was saying, you can swap out the video and just have some very simple things halfway through, and the H5P can prevent them from scanning forward. So at halfway through, they say, are you still watching? They would have to say yes. At the end, that you would say, hey, did you see that all? So just on a very simple verification, did you open up the book level? Those are easy to make. And I've got my music instructor, one of my adjuncts, are just remarkable material he's made. And he's just gone back through and done that to all of his, because so much of his class is content delivery is through lecture and video.
So one of the questions that I had that I'm not sure if there's a way of doing this easily within the system. Management wants to make sure that I record that there's enough content participation by the students, right, which is hard to do when it's online.
Right.
And previous instructors had graded when students were using the forums, and they thought that that was just a horrible thing, that they had to put some comment
right.
in there to get a grade. So I want to have a positive experience where maybe they can interact with each other or interact with me without saying, you need to do this stupid thing that you hate to do, because otherwise right, you don't get a full grade. Something positive.
Yeah, that's great. Well, it said that one of the things we can talk about maybe is using groups, and then you can break up your people into random groups, maybe 4 times during the course of a semester. So by the end of it, they've all worked with everybody a little bit, but no one's been just stuck with the worst kid in class, which is always a trouble with groups, right? My daughter says for her pallbearers, she wants her group from UNC to help her so they can let her down one last time. Anyway, yeah, so we can talk about that, and we can also on the H5P, that's definitely, you can tell who's been there, who's doing it, so you see that consistently. And for the discussions, limiting the discussions, and Sarah has so many great things on this that she can share too, about making really meaningful discussions where you're asking them to, where it makes sense that they would want to share, or they have something to share. How did this impact you? Have you ever seen something like this? And then limit it so that you just have 1 or 2 of these at intervals, so they aren't just onerous. Because really, if it's just pro forma, we all know that that's pretending to learn. So that's great. We can definitely work on that. Let's see. I think Mike joined us too. Hey, Mike, if you ever want to follow up on this further, friend, reach out to me. With that said, we are at quitting time here. I'm just going to sit here for a little bit if anybody has any closing questions. But really, if any of this triggered your imagination, or you're thinking, hey, maybe I can do this or that, reach out to me and we can set up a time to spend half an hour or so. And on a lot of this stuff, it's like 3 sessions where we'll have a little longer session and then a shorter one and then just sort of a follow-up so you feel comfortable. And just find the goal for a lot of this stuff is what's the most efficient way to make it, because if it takes you forever, it's hard to warrant, spending that part of your semester.
Awesome. I appreciate the time.
Yeah. Hey, thanks so much. I sure appreciate it. Crystal, if you have other questions or whatnot, please stick around. If you've got questions and discussion prompts and stuff, Sarah does a lot on this, and she's the bomb when it comes to that. Michael?
Are the other ones recorded that you did earlier today?
I believe so. Sarah, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm here. So Michael, hey, it's good to see you.
Hey, happy holidays, everyone.
Yeah.